G'day everyone and welcome to the Porg Diaries, a canonical review of Star Wars. My name is Jack.
My name's Simone.
And today we are going to talk about the High Republic, Into the Dark, and A Test of Courage.
Our second review, Jack.
Correct.
Last podcast we did the first book in the series, being
The
Light of the Jedi.
Light of the Jedi, yep, that's right.
So because these books are both a bit smaller, I think we've decided we can review them together.
Light of the Jedi went for like 40 chapters and split into 3 parts. It was a grand overarching story. Like the words were tiny on the page. These ones, they're both like 20 chapters. One's even smaller than the other, and they're like very big words. And it's a simpler story. It only focuses on like a few characters and like 2 locations compared to the previous one.
And the first one's aimed more at your, I guess, young adult, and the other one aimed probably more at kids, I guess.
Well, not necessarily kids, but I would say junior readers.
Junior readers, yeah.
That's not saying that you wouldn't enjoy it.
No.
Because it's not like, and then he went to these shops. Like it's not like that.
I agree.
So it's like,
it's still decent content in there, but it's certainly written, I think, skewed more towards a junior
it's written
audience.
for a younger audience.
That's
right.
right.
It's like, so basically I think the best way I could put it is anyone could read any of these books, but not everyone could read Light of the Jedi.
Right, exactly.
If that's sort of a better way to put it.
Okay, so the 2 books that we're going to review are... Drumroll.
I already said, Into the Dark and A Test of Courage.
Okay, so
we'll do Into the Dark first. We'll do a much like the last one, a non-spoilery overview and a... Review. And followed up by non-spoiler review and review of A Test of Courage. Then we'll jump into spoilers, where we'll just sort of...
mishmash them
together, have a bit of a chat about it all.
Give our overall feedback on both books.
And we will give you a warning when the spoiler part comes up.
All right.
Without further ado, I think we should get started. So, we'll do... Which one shall we do first? Into the Dark or A Test of Courage?
I think Into the Dark.
Into the Dark, all right. Well, Into the Dark, our main character is Reith Silas, who's a brand new character who we've not heard from before. He's a Padawan, so a trainee, a trainee, I guess. And then he is, he likes to stay on Coruscant in the temple, which is like, at home. He likes to research, he likes to study. He doesn't really like to get out in the world, he doesn't like to do much. When he's getting assigned tasks and missions, he likes it to be, at home.
He's pretty
in his
conservative.
laboratory. Right, very much so. And his master is Jorah Marley, who is, she encourages him to, to branch out and to, attempt to open his mind, I guess you could say.
Which, just to put here for those who may not have heard the first review, we've already met Jorah Marley.
Correct. In the previous novel. But we won't say what happens to her in that novel because, so the idea is, I guess, is that Into the Dark... so A Test of Courage is set after both of these books, as far as I can tell. It's and it doesn't have a lot of overlap. It's True. Very standalone. They make like 1 or 2 references, and then like the end of the book ties in with crosses over with like the comic, something like that. So it's very adjacent to everything else. This one, however, Into the Dark, it's set almost parallel with Light of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So I think it's like the second half of the book is like you could say like a day after the Light of the Jedi sort of wraps up its story, and the first half of the book sort of just takes place at intervals throughout the story. So as thus, Jorah Marley, what she does in Light of the Jedi impacts what happens in Into the Dark. So once again, we won't say what happens to her in that book just in case you're planning on only reading this book and yada yada, so on and so forth. So anyways, So Reith Silas, he wants to stay at home. Jorah Marley says, "Get out of here. Let's go explore the world." She is assigned to be the head or whatever you call it of, or the master, I guess you could say, of Starlight Beacon, which is the grand beacon from the previous novel. And so, as thus, she says, "All right, well, once you're wrapped up here, come on down." So, much to his, begrudging, he gets sent off, and he starts to travel to Starlight Beacon with a group of Jedi and other characters, I guess you could say, non-Jedi sort of smuggler characters.
Well, they hire those characters
a ship and then
to take them.
However, along the way, something with the galactic-wide great disaster that we saw happen in Light of the Jedi. Because of all of that happening, they get sent off course and they have to land on an abandoned space station, and they have to wait their time out there while they wait for, the rest of the galaxy to sort of sort itself out. And because of that, they're sort of just waiting on there for the first half of the book. There's the second half, the plot really gets going. But at the first half, that's sort of where they're sort of stationed at. So, yes, that's more or less the.
And I think important to note, which I mentioned in the first podcast, different authors. So even though this is written parallel with the other book, this one is written by Claudia Gray.
Correct. Who's a very great author.
Yeah, absolutely.
She has written some of the best books in Star Wars, like universally acclaimed, won awards for her books, I think. Okay. Like very, very, lots of praise to her. I wouldn't say that this is one of her, better ones compared to some of her other work, which is just outstanding. In comparison, this isn't as good. But that, once again, you're comparing good to great, right?
Sure.
So her other stuff is outstanding, but this is still pretty damn good, in my opinion, at least. So, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, I did enjoy this book. I agree. I think it was really well written. I enjoyed the characters. I think the difference between this and the first novel is this had although it's got some, lots of different plots and whatnot, it felt a bit lighter for me. And certainly some of the characters, like there's a really interesting character on the ship called Geode. That's not a spoiler, is it? We can say that. Who is a rock. And is really funny. And I think the way that she describes Geode the rock, basically he's a rock, but it sort of insinuates that this rock does move around. And you never really know whether he does or not. But that's pretty cool. There's certainly a younger cast of characters as well, which is interesting.
Well, there's adult characters as well.
There is, but the general feel, as you mentioned, Reith is kind of one of the main characters.
Right. As is Affie Hollow, who is one of the other members on the ship, and she is also younger in age.
So I liked this book. I think compared, it as I said, it took me a little while to get into Light of the Jedi, whereas this one I probably did get into it fairly quickly. It was easy to understand. And, that said, is also written for young adult as well, so that makes sense. I think having read both books, I definitely appreciated the crossover. However, I think it's really important to say that if you'd not read both books and this was the first one, you'd absolutely still be fine. I think the plot scene's described really well with the Great Disaster. I don't think you are left wondering what's happened if you haven't read the other book.
Well, not really, because, I'm just sort of thinking, I think so something like A Test of Courage would be fantastic to read for someone who hasn't read Light of the Jedi. I think that'd be really easy to read because it basically has nothing to do with anything else. And when they're describing and referencing like the Great Disaster and whatnot, the stuff they're describing and referencing, it's like, it's just like an oft mention, and they inform you on everything you need to know. And that being said, the book itself has nothing to do really with like the Great Disaster.
The Great Disaster, I agree.
This one is directly impacted. The story starts because of the Great Disaster, and I suppose they do explain it, but I don't think.
You don't get the enormity of it as you do from the other book.
Right. Because this novel is just focused on like 4 characters or whatever it is.
Yep.
Well, not 4 characters, like 5, 6 characters, something. But still, it is focused on a group of characters, whereas the first one is based on like, several groups of characters, right? Like 20 different people all running around doing their own thing.
And character development, I think, was definitely the key to this book.
Right. Well,
whereas the other one was more around the events.
That's actually a good point. That's actually a very good point. Definitely, this one has a lot of absolutely. Like, you definitely start the book and end the book feeling like you've seen a character grown.
That's exactly right.
Each of the characters, I should say.
So I guess my point is I definitely enjoyed the book, I would say more so, because I'd read both. However, if I had just picked this up, because of that character development, I think it's a nice, easy book to read.
It is.
I do like the fact that I now know the whole history of the Great Disaster and probably make me appreciate a bit more where they're at, but it wasn't imperative for me to still like this book.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like if I were reading it, it would somewhat annoy me because they don't really ever explain what exactly the Great Disaster is and why exactly it happened or how it happened or anything like that, because it's not important to the story.
Yeah, right.
But even still, they reference it, and once again, it starts the story. So if I were reading this and not having known or read Light of the Jedi, and I just read this and went, what? I'd probably be a little bit confused because I'd have finished the story going, hang on, so what was this?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Because this meant nothing. That being said, though, if you can look past that, you could totally read this without reading Light of the Jedi because it has, it has, it just sort of, like a lot of the, like, if anything, the stuff that happens in Light of the Jedi doesn't matter too much. It's only really that Great Disaster bit that matters. The rest of it doesn't really do anything. So anyways, I think overall I enjoyed it. I definitely enjoyed it. I liked each of the characters. I think, they each had a unique sort of flow to them, I guess you could say. Yeah. And they each had their own sort of personalities, characters, and stuff that you could sort of get into and relate to, I suppose. I feel like certainly some characters got more limelight than others.
Yes, that's true.
So like Wraith, obviously Wraith is the main character, so naturally he would. But there were some characters where you could definitely, well, to me at least, you could definitely feel, this character got a little bit less than the other characters.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think that was intentional. As I said, overall, I think, so for me it was a really nice flow on as a second book. And that would definitely be my recommendation. But as I said, if you were just reading this on your own, then no worries at all as well. So, good book. Probably, there was some interesting twists and turns, but I also felt it was a bit predictable in terms of what happens.
Yep.
Whereas in the first book, we're definitely surprised by events.
Right. I'm not so sure predictable. A little bit predictable, I suppose, at the end. But I would say less predictable, more just less plot twists and
yes.
less plot, I guess, would be because just inherently because of what the story is. They're not well, that's their whole thing, and I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad thing. It's just a simpler story.
And do you think also maybe it's this story really is there just to develop those characters for future books as well? Because I can see that the main characters in this that we've met are definitely going to we're going to meet them again, and I think they're integral parts of the High Republic as an overall.
Well, I think they've already been confirmed for. Which book was it? The Rising Storm, I think, or it's either that one or it's one of the other ones. Like they've already been confirmed to appear in. No, I think it's the next young adult book, which I forget the name of, but they've already been confirmed to appear in another book, like Cormac and Wreath.
Right.
And then the ones on the ship, the what's their names? Leox and Geode, and they've also been confirmed to appear in, I think, something else. So so they're definitely going to appear again.
Sure.
Which once again is a cool thing that I like. How they're all appearing in different books and mediums and all that. That's cool. That being said, though, no, I definitely get what you're saying. So Light of the Jedi was definitely a setup for not only the era but also the characters in that book. So they were setting up all of the characters. In this one, they were much definitely doing the same. So they were like, all right, here's Wreath. Meet Wreath.
Yes.
Right? And then by the end of the book, his character has developed enough that you can feel that he's had development, but that he can have more development.
Right. I agree with that.
And same with Cormac and all of the other ones. You can definitely feel there's more to them, which will be continued on in later books, which for some people might be a bit... disappointing because they might like a wrap up in the story, or if you feel like that's actually a good thing to like leave you sort of leave more on the table than that's something what the story does, without getting into spoilers and all that. That like definitely leaves more on the table to be desired. So I think overall, I enjoyed it.
Rating for you?
Out of 10. Ooh. Do you have a rating?
I'd go a 7.
7 out of 10. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd go more a 6 out of 10.
Ooh, harsh critic.
Nah, well, it wasn't. Look, it was enjoyable, but like that ending.
No spoilers here.
No spoilers, but it was a bit, and
well, that's what I mean when I said it was a little bit predictable. In that nothing was like wow, shocking like with the first book. Yeah. So I get what you're saying.
And just in comparison, just slightly more average feeling, I guess you could say. Which that's nor here nor there. That is what you get. But overall, I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it. I personally, I don't know if I would recommend it for a newbie. Certainly, if you've never read a Star Wars book, or if you've never, I should scratch that. If you've never like watched or heard of Star Wars before, not sure that this is the best place to start. Unlike Light of the Jedi, where you could pick that up and read it, and you'd just be like, oh yeah, cool, I get it.
Yeah, I agree with that.
No, like this one, and it's not even like having just seen a Star Wars movie. It's just knowing what's going on. So like even having just read Light of the Jedi, and then this one, and not having seen any of the Star Wars movies, that would just help immensely, because I just feel there is certain...
assumptives?
Yeah, that you kind of already know what's going on.
Sure.
Or even if you don't know what's going on in the High Republic, you kind of know what's going on in the universe of the Jedi and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would recommend it for newbies. I think it would be
interesting.
Something that I would read after I've read Light of the Jedi or one of them, or just gotten into the universe a bit more.
It's hard. Well, me being a newbie, I don't know. I guess because I have read Light of the Jedi, so for me it was a good story after that. But overall I enjoyed it. So the next one, A Test of Courage. So this is the junior, aimed more at your junior reader. To be honest, after two, obviously a big book and then a medium-sized book where we've developed a lot of characters. This was a nice one to finish on because obviously, it is a simpler book and I think very much purposely so. You want to give a bit of an overview of this one before we review it?
Yeah, all right. So, A Test of Courage is the last novel in the first wave of literature being released before the second wave, which I believe begins in June or June or something around that. May maybe, regardless.
Yep. Something
around that. So this is the last book, and certainly you can feel that. So what they're planning to do is for each wave they're going to release an adult novel, a junior novel, and a young adult novel, and then also like a kids novel. But that one is like literally just like a retelling of Light of the Jedi. So that one doesn't really count. But that's been their plan, and they've said that from the start. And it seems that that's the way that they're going with what they've announced for the next wave. So. As thus, this one is the junior novel, and so this one is the last novel of the first wave. So our main character is Venestra Rowe, who is 15 years old, I think, and why that's important is because she has just turned.
Well, she's one of the youngest. She's the youngest Jedi.
Well, yeah, she's just become a Jedi Knight, and she's like one of the youngest Jedi Knights in like
history.
Well, I think, or just like, you know, very rare or something like that. So she's been charged with looking over Avon Starros, who is like a 12-year-old or something, and she's like a bit of like an inventor or that kind of character. And they're on board to go to the dedication ceremony of Starlight Beacon, which we have seen at the very end of each of the other books. So they're on their way to meet the ending of each of the other books, right? So basically, this is like the last sort of book. Like you can tell that this is nearing like the end of the other stories. Like all of the other stories have happened. This is afterwards, right? So they've got Imri Kantaros, which is another Jedi Padawan there. Then there is a droid, J6, who I think is Avon Starros' droid, and droid being robot. And then there is an ambassador's son called Honesty Weft, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
And
they're all around that 12
mark. To 15, yeah, they're all like around that age. And so then they, so they're like, all right, well, they're going on board towards this Starlight Beacon, but soon bombs go off aboard the cruiser, and mayhem ensues, and they all escape on the shuttle, and they make it to a nearby moon, which there's some sort of plot that goes on there, I guess.
And then it very much focuses on those characters.
Oh, so this is so like if you want to talk about like if you've never even heard of Star Wars, you could read this and then never hear of Star Wars again. You'd be fine, because this is like, like other than the fact that there's Jedi and they make reference to like one or two other things, and it ends on the Starlight dedication ceremony and all that. It's very, very separate.
It is.
It's just a group of 4 characters, or like 5, or 5 characters, I think it is, and they go off on a mission together, or like a journey together, and they're all like 12, 13, 14, 15, I think, and they're all very young. It's clear that they're meant to be for that younger range of people.
They have a bit of an adventure, some experiences.
Right. They have some character development. There are enemies, which, are Nihil, I think, but, even still, it's like,
you don't need to know about the Nihil from the previous
like if you had just said they're pirates, you'd be like, all right.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Exactly.
Because it's like, they're very much, they're very much by the numbers sort of your everyday sort of Joes. And look, that's okay. That's fine. It works for the story, for what the story is going to tell, because it's a
It's almost like a sweet novel for me. Like I enjoyed this. Of course, it was an easy read because I am an adult. But putting myself in the lens of a child reading it, I'd really enjoy it. And there's enough sort of plot tension there. Having said that, though, I'd still recommend it in the series. I really enjoyed reading this as the last part of the High Republic. Because it did definitely have some references to the other books that were nice to tie in. I probably wouldn't have to read it. Like, it wouldn't be, wow, if you don't read this book, you know, you're not going to know what happens in the whole High Republic. So it's probably a nice to read, but as you said, it could very much be a standalone. You don't have to read it. But I'm happy that we've added this into our High Republic reading.
And once again, these characters will appear again, so it isn't, it's not like it's worth nothing. So Venestra, Ro, and Imri Kantaros have been confirmed to appear in the next. I think they're actually going to appear in the next young adult novel. So already you've seen a crossover from junior to young adult, and they appeared in like the comics already. I think they did as well. So their characters are moving on, but it's definitely a thing where it's like, it's a very standalone, contained story that doesn't mean much, all things considered, and that's okay. It's very simple. Just like you can't go into it expecting Light of the Jedi, right? You can't go into it expecting these huge galactic events.
Of course not,
because there are no huge galactic events. You've got like 2 pirates and 4 kids, and that's the story.
And I've got to be honest, as a kid's story, I thought it was good. I'd actually give this a good solid 8. Looking at it as the book that it's meant to be. I think it was well written. As you said, it was nice tie-in to some of the characters that we will potentially see further down the track. And it's an overall just nice book to read. Nice would be a good descriptor. Like, there isn't much to say about this book. Like, there are a few interesting ideas that are introduced. You go, that's interesting. And it, like, you can make some connections with themes, I guess, if you really wanted to. But overall, it's like, honestly, it's just a harmless kids book, and that's and it's nice for what it does. Like, it's a nice story. It's fun. It's enjoyable. That's right. So what's your rating on this one out of 10?
Okay. I would say maybe. See, I'd say it's 7.
Okay.
Because I feel like this one you can take less seriously. So whereas the first one, Into the Dark, you're judging that from the lens of an adult novel, because even though it's young adult, it's still adult enough that themes are put forward, that writing should be, yada yada yada, so on and so forth. With The Test of Courage, it's like, it's a kid's book, and it totally 100% nails what it's meant to do.
Absolutely.
Like, it's entertaining. Like, it keeps you hooked on like, if I was a kid reading it, I'm pretty sure I'd enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm pretty sure.
All right, so now my next question is, we've read the 3 books starting the High Republic. What's your overall feel
real quick, would you say that A Test of Courage is good for children? Like, sorry, not for children, for newbies.
Yeah, I think it's an easier... I just think it's a good standalone book. I mean, to be honest, you're not going to read that and learn a lot about Star Wars. Like, it doesn't, for me, have this massive Star Wars theme. There's obviously references and... there's some talents and things of some of the characters, but so a newbie, but to be honest, it could be for anybody. Yeah,
so it's like newbies would be fine reading it, but if you were a newbie and you wanted to explore Star Wars, probably not your best.
It's not. No, you wouldn't start with that. But look, overall, High Republic for me, which is what I was touching on before, I think it's a really great series. I actually find it interesting that they've purposely created an adult, junior and young adult. Like, I find that a really interesting way to write. And also, again, as we've touched on, having different authors for each of them as well, because you get a little bit of something different. So overall, I'm really hooked on this series. I'm looking forward to reading more. Shall we move perhaps into some spoilers now?
All right. Well, I suppose we should. So here's the spoiler warning, everybody. stop watching now if you do not want any spoilers on Into the Dark or A Test of Courage. We will most likely just speak spoilers about them both intertwined with each other. There will probably be a bit of spoilers for Light of the Jedi as well. Not too many, like nothing it's like I'm not going to reveal the ending of the book and everything, but be warned, there's probably a few spoilers for that novel as well. Simply because of how it ties in and all that. So you have been warned, and if you proceed further from this point, bad luck, buddy. 3, 2, 1, spoiler.
Righto.
So, shall we talk about? What do you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, okay, what's some of the main themes then of which one are we doing first? Yeah.
You know what I thought was interesting? I'll just say this: Into the Dark and A Test of Courage, they don't relate much at all. They're very, very separate stories. And I suppose we'll have to just inherently part of its nature because, A Test of Courage, we basically spoke about the entire story in non-spoilery part.
Yeah, that's right. There's not much to spoil.
There's not much to spoil. There's the light whip.
Yes, that was cool.
And there's one other thing or something that they mention which we can talk about later, but generally overall, very just standalone.
Yeah, exactly. As I said before, it's a nice book. It's an easy book to read. You've got the Nile in there, and there's they come on and there's capturing and whatnot from the Nile, but nothing earth shattering.
But Into the Dark, Drengia.
Oh, Drengia are really interesting, aren't they? What did you think of the Drengia?
But before we get onto that, I was just going to say that the interesting thing about these two novels is that they're so diametrically opposed. There is nothing about them that relates whatsoever. Mm-hmm. But there is one theme that's interesting because it also pops up in the comic series as well, which we'll review on later. And it's this theme that I keep seeing popping up in the High Republic, which I don't know if it's intentional or if it's just that's the way that the first sort of batch of stories have started, or if it is intentional and this may play into something larger at hand later. Mm-hmm. But both A Test of Courage and Into the Dark have dealt with grief and loss.
That's a good point, actually.
So A Test of Courage, we've got Imri Kantaris, who is a Padawan who loses his master, and then he starts getting he's like, oh well, what's going on, and he's oh my god, and then he's trying to push back his grief because he doesn't want to really feel about it, and then we get Honesty Weft and his father dies as well. That's less meaningful because he's not a Jedi, so it's sort of just
But it's still dealing with loss, as you're saying. Of course,
but it's as in it's not as heightened his emotions,
right?
Whereas Imri, he gets so angry and he gets filled with so much rage for what has happened. He turns to the dark side a little bit there, right? So he sort of peels over onto this sort of strange evil side of things that sort of make you go, oh, what the hell is this? And he turns to the dark side, right? He sort of he attacks Vernestra, and he's filled with so much rage. Obviously, it wears off after a little bit, and and it doesn't mean much after that. But I find that interesting because then we turn to Cormac Vetus in Into the Dark.
Yeah.
And he has the exact same thing. He doesn't turn to the dark side, but what happens with him is that he still has that going on, even after the book finishes, which is why I feel like this could play into something later, because that's not resolved.
That's true.
At the very end of the book, that isn't resolved. Now, he's developed on his thoughts around it, and he's not as, angsty around it, but he's not like, haha, oh, it's all good. No. He's still like, this isn't great. I'm not sure that I'm on board with this. And he's still confused by the end of the book. So, for context, Cormac Vetus, throughout the book, he 25 years back, his master dies. And 25 years after that, he's still thinking about that.
But see, it's interesting. I find this, they have jumped on this point because, as we know, as Star Wars fans would know as well, you don't express those emotions. You don't feel grief, and they're
Jedi,
Jedi, and they're really touching on that in terms of how you deal with that, and it gets somewhat swept under the carpet. Hence, 25 years later, he's still dealing with that, right? And it's almost like an embarrassment or this uncomfortable feeling of, because Jedi are not supposed to feel that way.
Right. And that's sort of his angst that he voices throughout the entire novel, is that he says, Jedi are not meant to grieve, they're not meant to feel sorrow and whatnot, or at least that's what he believes. And then because of that, he's still troubled by this thing that happened 25 years ago.
Right.
So he has lived like a quarter of his life. He's lived a really good portion of his life, and he's still grieving,
living with
over this thing. And even at the end of the book, while he's not as like, can't believe this, blah blah blah, he's still like, yeah, look, I'm not sure that I agree with the teachings that this is blah 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 blah. He's still thinking that, right? Which which is really interesting, because this is the High Republic. They have not seen like their masters and Jedi die in like, I can only imagine a hell of a long time.
Yeah,
like Jedi don't die. Right, exactly. It's rare. It's very, very rare. And so because of that, they're all sort of like, whoa, shit, that just happened.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And then they're like, shocked by such a thing happening. And so that when they have to struggle with grief, they can't handle it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. And it does seem to be something they're purposely focusing on, actually in all 3 books.
3 books?
I think
Light
in all
of
the books. Yeah, Light of the Jedi had it there as well.
Just
in terms of, there's a lot of talk about feeling sadness and grief, and because they've not dealt with it before, so they're not sure how to, and as Jedi they need to, have this sort of neutral feeling towards people, and it's an interesting thing.
And they touch on it in the comic as well. Which to me, that only says one thing. That says to me that this is intentional. And if this is intentional, then that means that I can only ask why. So to me, perhaps that's a way of them leading into the eventual downfall of the Jedi Order.
I think you're right.
Because how do the Jedi go from the High Republic to them all being yippee-ki-yay to them being not like very sort of regimented and not good at all? Well, maybe, I'm not saying that they're all going to turn to the dark side. That would be a little bit weird. But maybe a lot of them just left the Order. We know, maybe. like that could be something that happens where they all get so frustrated with the Jedi teachings, they all get so frustrated with, this.
It gets fractious, yeah.
Right, but and they all because they can't deal with their grief and whatnot, and so they eventually leave the Order. But I'm saying, what if it's like a mass exodus kind of thing, like not just like, Cormac leaves. Like I'm talking about like hundreds of Jedi leave, and that could be a big turning point or something.
I guess we'll wait
know
and
what
see.
I'm saying?
Hey, let's move on to you touched on before the Drengir. So the Drengir are another, I guess, villain. Yeah, a really interesting one. So what did you think? Were you surprised by the Drengir? Did you? Because they sort of there was a lot of mystery around what this was, what this sort of being was that was there, and then eventually revealed itself towards the end as the Drengir, who are like these weird plant creatures, but obviously extremely strong, and they were interesting.
Well, I think it's interesting because now we've got 2 villains. Now we've got 2 main villains as our villains of the era. and I can only wonder like what that means for the future, and like, are they planning on introducing more villains? Are they or like obstacles, I guess, or enemies? And like what are they going to do with these creatures?
Yes.
Like what are they going to do? Because that's the big thing for me. So like the execution in the book is one thing, but for me, larger scale is where are they going to go with the Drengir? Because the Drengir are clearly, unlike the Nile, where the Nile, they're very sort of, they're just sort of like, they're marauders, and even though Marchion Rowe has like this larger plan that he's going to enact.
That's not the typical Nile, though.
Right.
They're sort of pretty much meathead pirates, basically.
That he has to form into this fighting machine that he claims he's going to do. But even still, we haven't seen it happen yet. The Drengir, they're not cunning, manipulating, planning things. They're just ruthless, and they're just like, we're going to eat you, basically. Like, literally eat you. We are going to consume you. Right? Which is full on. And so I can only imagine if that's the direction they're going, where we've got these two enemies who and they're not allied with each other, and it doesn't seem that they will be, because one is imbued with the dark side, like you remember that, like they were talking about how even the Sith, who are these ancient enemies of the Jedi who are drenched in the dark side and whatnot, and they're evil and whatnot, even they were like, well, these guys are kind of
nuts.
Let's exactly. Yeah. Let's put them away. And so they trapped them in like a statue or something, or whatever they'd said. Yeah. They trapped them away. They locked them away. They said, "Nah, sorry, buddy, you're out."
But then the Nile and the Drengir in the end fight it off because they're both sort of crazy.
In the novel.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
And which was I liked that part.
I liked that part too. And that was my favourite part with Geode, where he just appeared and saved the day. Like, that was awesome, right?
Well, let's talk about Geode.
Yeah. Geode's great. Geode's one of my favourite characters, and he doesn't do much.
Well, the internet doesn't like Geode.
Oh, really? Interesting.
The internet because the internet's dumb, you see, Mum. That's often what happens with the internet.
Did you like Geode?
Oh, I love Geode. Because they thought so the most common argument against him is that it's stupid to have a rock in Star Wars. Which, look, I think you're missing the point if that's your takeaway, because it is hilarious.
It was hilarious. It actually really, for me, was a highlight of the book. I agree. I love Geode.
I agree.
Great. I don't know if I'm going to love him long term, because I'm not sure how much more you can develop the character of a rock. But I thought he was awesome, and I really loved, actually, the relationship with him and Leox, sorry. That was really cool. And for me, it also endeared me more to Leox as well, because of the way that he just talked about Geode all the time, in terms of him being, his colleague, his companion.
But I love all of the jokes that they can make, where it's like, oh yeah, man, you should see him at bars. It's like,
That's
what?
Right.
And all you're thinking about is like, hang on a minute, what the hell? How does a rock go to a bar?
So funny. And then in the end, he saves the day, which is
awesome.
Right.
Which is like, it's like throughout the entire story, it's just a rock.
Yeah.
And he's just sitting there, and you're sort of just like,
okay,
is it actually just a rock?
Yeah, that's right.
Or like, what's happening? Are they crazy? And then suddenly, out of nowhere, at the very end, Geode helps.
It was so funny.
Like he stands over him and he helps him, and it's just like,
because it's like really intense part where you think, sorry, what was the guy that he helped again?
Reith.
You think, oh my gosh, Reith's he's going, like this is it, and then Geode's just there. It was great. Man, I love that ending.
He's such a great character too, though.
Yeah.
He's just and because in Light of the Jedi there wasn't really much comedic things happening in it. It was a very serious story, which was fine. Like, it definitely worked. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. And even in A Test of Courage, which was more lighthearted. It was still, there wasn't much comedy in it. But Geo, it's like comedy gold.
Oh, so
good. And it totally alleviates the story perfectly. Claudia Gray really sort of nailed that one. Yeah. Oh, should say, A Test of Courage was written by what's her name? Justina Ireland. Worth putting that in there because we didn't mention that she
of course,
that.
Yes.
So she's the third author that we can see. I think there's 5 authors all up. So she's the third author that we've got. She's going to do the young adult novel next time, I think. So that'll be interesting to see what's coming on with that.
So the other really interesting character for me was Des.
Des Ryden?
Yeah.
Why's that?
His journey is really interesting. So he's the opposite of Wreath. So he and both have had the same master, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yep.
And she recognised the different traits in both of them. So I first of all saw Des as this bit of a, cowboy rock star guy that just sort of gets out there.
Well, that was his thing.
He's a little bit Anakin, actually, in a way. Do you know what I mean? In terms of him just sort of no fear and just gets out there and does the job.
And he's very
gung-ho.
Right, but he's very charismatic, and because
he's very charismatic.
You like him.
You do like him, yeah.
Like he's not a bad bloke.
Yeah.
And
somewhat of a mentor, he turns out to be to Reese.
In a way, in a roundabout sort of way. But he has his own struggles, which we learn throughout the book. That he's like, maybe I am a little bit too feisty, and maybe I am a little bit too gung ho about everything.
Yeah.
But then.
Well, then he
eventually.
We think maybe that he's gone. I always had a little suspicion, to be honest, that he was. That wasn't the end of him. So the Drengia get him, and look, obviously that's affected him enormously. And I did like that scene actually when Wreath then saves him, pretty much.
Colmark.
Oh, Cormac, sorry. Getting my characters mixed up. When he actually finds him and then...
Oh, sorry, Des.
Sorry.
That's my bad,
Getting my characters mixed up. No, it was Wreath, yeah. So Wreath finds him and, almost loses his own life, but then manages to bring him back. But then Des had then permanently changed.
Yeah.
And so it just showed the psychological effects
that the Drengia had on Des.
Because, he went through a really...
horrific,
horrendous experience,
and really interesting to see Des's ultimate resolution, where he says, "All right, well, the only way that I can, just be happy with the decision that I've chosen, is," he basically says, "I'm going to take," what was it called, the Barash vow, or the Barash vow, or something like that, which is like this extreme, interesting because they've got 2 different sort of vows you can have in the book. One is a Wayseeker, and then one is the Barash vow, and the Barash vow is like much more extreme, where basically the Wayseeker, which is what Orla Jarini wants to become.
That's right.
And she says at the very start of the book, this is what I want to become. I'm not too sure if I want to become it, and at the end of the book, she's like, all right, I'm a Wayseeker. That's officially me. That's what I'm doing.
Yes.
And so she becomes a Wayseeker. And a Wayseeker is, you still are a Jedi, right? Like, you still semi-represent the Order. You still kind of, sort of, you're here, you're helping out, you're not too bad, and you're friendly with the Jedi and you might help them out and all that.
Yeah.
But you're not taking orders from the High Council anymore.
Right.
Which I think is interesting because that sort of shows already that there's a little bit of, not necessarily distrust in the Council, but people aren't fully on board with the Council. Like, obviously when we see the Council on, in the prequels, it's like, there's some very concerning, like, oh, that's a little bit, right? But in this one, like they seem 10 times better. Like, they seem fantastic.
Yeah.
And even still, Orla Jarini is thinking, I don't want to take order from the High Council because it's not it
didn't feel right for her.
Right, which is interesting that we're seeing that sort of thing already, even 200 years before, and we can see that maybe fundamentally the Jedi Order was maybe flawed from the start. The inherent order of what it all was maybe flawed from the start, and it never was.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And it never was this great perfect thing. Even though we can obviously see right now it's far better than it ever was.
Yeah.
In the prequel
in the
era.
current,
this is still an interesting way to sort of look at it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so that's what all of Jarini decides to do.
That's right.
But then we see Des, and he decides to take the Barrage Vow. And the Barrage Vow is far more like full on, because it's similar to the Wayseeker in that you sort of separate yourself from the Order and all that, except with the Barrage Vow, what you're doing instead is you're completely, utterly separating yourself from everything that the Order has. Like, disengaging from anything but the Force itself.
Yeah.
So you're still in tune with the Force, meditating and whatnot, but when it comes to the Order, goodbye.
But I think for him, because really the trauma that he went through, that for him was really the only option. He just, he had to disengage himself. So it'd be interesting to see down the track if we see him again, or if that's the end of his character, whether he just stays in that state or...
Right.
Yeah. I have to tell you, though, one of the most well-written parts of the book, and for me was extremely emotive, just going into another area here, was when Reith discovered the death of Jorah Marley.
Right, okay.
Of his master. That, for me, that was, really emotional, and I think... What I loved about that scene is the build up to that, the way he found out. But then he really, drew on those emotions. And again, interesting going back to, it's an emotional connection as well, to his master. And I think in a lot of ways, it made him a far stronger Jedi because of this grief that he felt, but he also drew on, just the amazing memories of his master. It actually got him through a number of the battles and things. So
right. Well, throughout the entire book, he's constantly, like, almost having like inner monologue of
what
Jorah
Marley say,
talking to him.
That's right. That was really powerful, don't you think?
Well, I think that impacted you more than me.
Right.
I remember. I didn't really pick up on it. I didn't really it wasn't something that I really noticed. But you said once you said it, I thought, and I was sort of picking up on it for the rest of the book. But you were saying that it's this connection that he has to her. It's like this almost spiritual bond that they have after death and all that. In which I hadn't really considered that. But when you said that, I was like, well, That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because it is almost like she's there. Like
right.
No,
really.
And
it just showed the depth of their their relationship
and
as
connection.
Master and
Apprentice.
Padawan. But it actually went deeper than that. She was obviously very good, because in some ways Des reflected as well, not to the depth I think that Reith did, but remember Reith would often talk to Des about, don't forget what would Jorah Marley say, and he would, but I think it affected him a lot more. And it actually, her death, as sad as it was in some ways, as I said, has shaped him to be this really strong Jedi that he's growing into. So I found that really interesting.
And interesting that Jorah Marley's death wasn't seen in Into the Dark. It was seen, however, in Light of the Jedi.
Yes.
So if you've already read Light of the Jedi, you know what happens.
Right. Exactly. Well, I think that was the thing for me too, is I knew, and so we knew, but Reith didn't know. So that was also, I guess, a good thing about having read that book first, is that I knew that she'd died, and I actually was always feeling anxious for Reith because he had to find out. But I thought that the way that they wrote it was really, really well done.
Very well written, because you could totally get the feeling of, like, something bad's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's interesting. And look, I suppose the other point about both books is, again, they're bringing the Nile in to both books, and, that's the number one villain, but in different ways. I mean, they did it very passively, I think, in Test of Courage, because it's a kid's book. But they were still very much there as the villain. There was only
two of them. Right. They sort of showed up. They sort of were bad guys, and then they were defeated. I was like, okay,
that's right. And
that's fine. But
they've still got them into there as being, so they are definitely the constant in each of these books. And they're certainly going to be
still bad guys. Like even when we got introduced to our secondary villains in Into the Dark with the Drengia,
yes,
still we had a whole character. What was their name? Was it Nan or Nan
yes.
or something like that?
Who was the Nile? Yeah,
and her Hag was the other guy.
Yes,
and then they brought in like a full on Nile team, and they were all like getting up and battling against each other and all that, and we're like, whoa, okay, we've got like a full-on, Nile like squadron here in Into the Dark, and in A Test of Courage we also had them here. So they're clearly meant to be the overarching villains. Definitely. Drengia, once again, not sure how large a role they're going to play. To me, it seems like the Nile are going to be like the main primary villains.
I agree.
Because they're like, Mark Yonro, he's got this whole plan.
Yeah.
He's gonna piece it all together. He's gonna, have this grand plan. The Drengia, not much like.
I don't think they're going to be long term, to be honest. I think
you reckon they're going to
I think they'll be wiped out. Yeah, I really do. I do. I think they might. They might extend on, but I just can't see them developing the Drengia into, as you're saying. Markion Rowe's got this plan in a plan, and he's that's going to grow. But I think the Drengia are just a group of your classic villains that will just be, I think, eventually wiped out, probably by the Nile, I would suggest.
Okay, so not.
I might be wrong, but that's just
that's interesting because I think they'll definitely carry on for like the next couple issues. Not issues. What do you call it? Like next couple. Story beats and whatnot. Because if they just introduced them and kill them, you'd be like,
no, I don't mean. Yeah, exactly. I'm just thinking longer term. I just can't see them developing. I get you.
So we're meant to have like 3 phases, like stretching like 2024 or something like that.
Right.
And I agree. I can't imagine the Drengia, unless once again we've only just been introduced to them. Maybe there's some more to them. Like there's something interesting behind them. But from what we've been given, it doesn't seem like you can stretch their story over like 3 years or whatever.
They're they're pretty one-dimensional, to be honest.
Very much so. Yeah. Like their whole deal is just, we want to eat you.
Right. Their plans, for God's sake, how much can you develop them?
But once again, intimidating villains, can definitely pose a threat, but not really a villain that I would be... That I would like... All right, I'll say this, right? I'll say that I would like them to pose a threat, and I would like the Jedi to sort of take him down, or maybe like a Jedi and Nile team up, or... Well, not team, but, sort of like they both take him down, and the Drengia, pun intended, get a thorn in their side.
Haha. Boom, boom.
But... I feel like if they were defeated fairly fast, I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay. Yeah. But then the Nile, I would like to continue on for...
absolutely.
But even still, do I want the Nile to keep on for 3 years? If we've already gotten 3 books, and we're in, what are we in, April?
Yeah.
Imagine... by December, we'd have 8 books or 10 books or something. And then over 3 more years, that's how much Nile can you have?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, won't it?
So I don't know. Are they going to introduce new villains? Are they going to introduce...
Maybe.
Like, what's...
Will the Sith come back into some form? I mean, that's an interesting thing.
No, I doubt that.
You don't think so?
No, I know you have like an inkling, but I seriously think that they're completely out. Completely 100%. I think that's the...
It wouldn't surprise me if later down the track we do see them, the Sith.
But they can't. Because the Jedi can't know that the Sith are around because in the Phantom Menace they're like, what, the Sith has been extinct for 1,000 years or whatever.
Yeah.
So if the Sith were around, they'd have to be in the shadows because we know that they're around, but just doing the rule of two, they're just like hiding in the shadows, planning their plan. But they're sort of just there, and they're not actually doing anything until we get to the Phantom Menace, where it's like, what? Yeah, they're here? Right. It's like, what? And then that's where that sort of comes out from, and all of that sort of...
So I think they're the main standout points for me in these two books. Did you have anything else in either of them that you wanted to cover? I feel like we've gone through the main plot points.
No, I feel like that's a good review summary of it all. I feel like that's like that's a pretty decent summary of it all, I guess.
I agree.
We covered most of the stuff that should be covered and all that. I think it was pretty good.
So what are we covering off next?
Right. So next up we will be doing, I guess, the last sort of final bits of the first wave of the High Republic with the short stories and comics within that whole
series.
Within the whole series, so stretching up to whenever we do it. And then the next time we'll return to the High Republic will be when they start their next wave of stories with June or whatever, wave 2. When they release that, we'll start doing those ones. And I think we can do it in the same way where we cover the adult novel by itself because hopefully it should be pretty large. There'll be a lot going on. And then we can cover the young adult and junior, so on and so forth, and then all that stuff. Sure. I think there's also meant to be like there's going to be a bit more, so there'll be like an audio drama, which will be interesting. Yeah, okay. There'll be a graphic novel, a manga, and then obviously just the regular short stories and comics that are going along with that. So there should be a bit more to cover. So we'll see where we go with that one when we do that, whereabouts we're going to place it all, how we're going to sort of situate it all and everything. But regardless, when we do get into all that, we'll get into all that. But currently, next podcast will be comics, short stories of Wave 1. And then that'll be us done until the June stuff, and then we'll, High Republic up again with all that.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. This has been the Porg Diaries, High Republic, Into the Dark, and A Test of Courage. Thank you for listening, everyone. Much appreciated. And I guess we will
see you next time.
Make sure to like, subscribe, ma'am.
Indeed.
All of the other nonsense on platforms that you're listening to.
That's right.
Cheers for watching, everyone. Have a good one.
Ciao.